Good afternoon, and sorry for this rush. I hope you really understand. It is the summit that opening now, and then the plenary going on with all the head of state, ministers. So it's really like very hectic, and we apologize for the little delay. And I apologize for all the panelists here that we make wait. So welcome to this event for Indigenous peoples, and also I think for the Mother Earth is really the most important event because this is the one delivering the action that we are asking for. And we all know that how much we need urgent action for our planet, not only the talk at the negotiations, but we need the delivery. And we are preparing this delivery to really serve our peoples and the planet. So that's all the objective of these events. So we have with us today an honor to have a distinguished panelists who are here today and composed from the members of Indigenous peoples, but also from the government and from the private and philanthropic people. And that's all what we need in order to fix our planet. So without delaying, so allow me to give the floor to our first keynote speakers, who is the Foreign Secretary, Mr. David Lamour, who is also the MP. So we really have the honor to have you with us, and thank you for making the time to our high-level summit, not to that one where you're supposed to be. We really appreciate. Please.
Do this slightly differently. Take that away. Well, look, can I just begin by saying what an absolute honor it is to be standing here as Labour's first Foreign Secretary here at COP after 14 years out of power, and what a pleasure it is to be here as Foreign Secretary, sharing this stage with wonderful Indigenous people, a wonderful philanthropists, ministers, all dedicating to dealing with the climate emergency. It's one of the privileges of my life to be back in power, actually able to do something about this agenda. And so let me just start by first saying, why do I care about forest tenure rights in the first place? Second, why should the world care? And third, working together, what we can do about it. The bottom line is, I got into politics because I care about helping my community secure equity, equal opportunities, and justice. And I represent in North London the constituency of Tottenham. It's where I'm from, and it would be described traditionally as an inner city neighbourhood in London. So let me just tell you a bit about my story. My parents arrived from Guyana, just on the northeast corner of South America. My father came to Britain in 1956. He was part of what we talk about in Britain as the Windrush generation. Windrush because that was the boat that people first arrived on in 1948, bringing people from the Caribbean. Many of them had contributed to the building of Britain after the Second World War and fought during the Second World War, and they arrived determined with a gleam in their eye for a new prospect in life. Over the course of that period then, I'm thinking about the community I represent because many of them face poverty and their families have faced poverty. Education was key, social justice was hugely important to those communities. And of course, coming from Guyana and the Caribbean, I'm thinking about what they left behind. in a lecture I gave very recently at Kew, I was reminded that my father used to take me to Kew Gardens in London. I had no reason why as a child he was taking me to the other side of London to hang out in a very large park. And of course it was because he wanted to be close to nature. I know that now to be true. And I have committed in my own life to support the rights of Indigenous people. My wife and I are founders of a conservation centre. It's called Sophia Point. And we work on the Essequibo coast in the middle of the rainforests in Guyana. We work alongside Arawak, Carib and Waru groups of Amerindian people, helping them preserve what is in their rainforests, working with the University of Guyana, helping them with their own rights, assisting them. They are the custodians of the land. We have a long lease on the land, working alongside them in a charitable effort, understanding and wanting to be part of a community that I am originally from. But I guess the other part to that story, of course, is recognizing that I stand here as a Briton, and I'm thinking too of the amazing, we talk about Britain, the green and pleasant land. Think about Robin Hood, you're thinking about Epping Forest and Sherwood Forests and those wonderful forests that we have in Britain. The point is that all of us have a connection with nature, all of us have a history, and that's, in a sense, grounds me as I come to this event. So that's why I was dedicated in my first major speech as Foreign Secretary to tackling this crisis, and it's why I explained in that speech my commitment not just to this issue and to Sophia Point, but what more we could do. So how do we build an economic model that allows us to continue to live in harmony with nature? The most heartening aspect of what I've seen at Sophia Point is hearing how it works to give communities agency in their lives. And tenure security gives communities the right to object to environmentally damaging projects, and it gives them alternative routes to sustainable livelihoods so that they can thrive as guardians of nature. So that's why I care about this issue. Why should you all care sitting there? Well, here are just a few statistics. Indigenous peoples and local communities manage and live in at least half of the world's land. This land contains much of the world's remaining biodiversity and over a third of intact forests. The world's forests are declining at an alarming rate. Every year, we lose an area that is just a bit larger than Azerbaijan itself. But the rights of Indigenous people and local communities are protected in just 10% of the land in which they reside. And over 1 billion people worldwide feel insecure about their rights to property or land. Funding for forest tenure then and management is sadly very low. It received less than 1% of all climate finance in the previous decade, much of which went to governments and NGOs. Almost 2,000 land and environmental defenders were killed between 2012 and 2022, and research shows that these were disproportionately likely to be Indigenous people. So the money they get to defend their rights to be custodians of our wonderful forests and the danger that they face in much of the world is serious and extreme. That's why it should alert us all. Now, in recent years, we have seen some positive steps extending those rights, with Brazil acknowledging 10 new indigenous territories since President Lula took office. We've seen new legislation, indeed in Guyana we saw new legislation. but also places like the Democratic Republic of Congo's law on Indigenous Peoples' rights. We've seen greater implementation, such as Indonesia's rollout of its social forestry program and more focus from donors with increasing engagement at events like this one. But still, we are starting from such a low base that there's much, much more that we need to do. So today's event is about what precisely we should be doing. And there'll be lots of ideas, of course, in this room, but I want to kickstart just some ideas about how we can play a role. If you're a donor, whether from a government like mine or a philanthropic foundation, this is about commitment, and it's about the long haul. Sustained commitment, committing to funding for nature, committing to funding for forests, and committing for forest communities, particularly their livelihoods and their rights to protect that nature on our behalf. And I'm pleased to confirm that the UK will ensure that of our £11.6 billion in climate finance, £3 billion will be for nature, and within that, £1.5 billion for forests. And with us today, of course, are key partners in that, are wonderful friends from Norway, who've got a long-standing commitment in this area, and of course the Bezos Foundation, who have done so much amongst the 25 donors who, with the United Kingdom, made the EPLC Forest Tenure Pledge at COP29 in Glasgow, which has signed $1.7 billion by 2025. And I'm delighted that in this area we are on track to meet that commitment and to confirm that the UK will play its part, keeping our promise to provide over 10% of that funding. And I hope today we can also talk about how we develop the next phase of that historic pledge next year in Brazil to show our commitment beyond 2025. So I can also announce a new 10-year program which will provide initial funding of £50 million over 2 years to reduce illegal logging and benefit forest people. And this builds on partnerships the UK's been forming in these communities for decades and generations, going almost back to when I first started in politics 25 years ago. And we're complementing this with new initiatives that invest even further in forest communities, a £94 million programme to strengthen forest communities' voices in governance processes, particularly for the Amazon, and a project to train local scientists in the Congo Basin. Now, if you're a partner government like Brazil or many others who are here today, this is also about guaranteeing rights. And as I said, there are some really important examples of this happening around the world. And I hope countries like the UK can work with us to build on this. This year, for instance, we launched a land facility program to partner with Global South governments to develop more effective and transparent land governance systems that better protect rural and forest tenure rights. And I hope that this model is one that we can continue to build on. But last but not least, for Indigenous people and local communities, I hope that this can be about seizing an opportunity. I recognise that you have been speaking up for decades, fighting to be heard with your own heritage. And thanks to the many Indigenous communities that I've met over the last few years, I'm all too aware that there can be a powerful sense that the system is rigged against you. But I hope that as quickly as possible we can turn that around and ensure that your rights are protected under the law, that you have the tools you need to make the right choices for you, for your communities and for your environment. And this is our goal with the next IPLC Forest Tenure Pledge. Our goal for the new program that I've announced, but I don't want you to take my word for it. We need more than anything else to listen to you, to hear you, and to hear how we can continue to make further improvements. Let me just end with one story. The community that I work with on the Essequibo coast in the rainforest of Guyana, when we were building the conservation centre, because of some of these rights issues, too often what was happening on their land is illegal mining, some of it very dirty, very disruptive to the environment. But communities from the indigenous Amerindian communities that I work alongside, finding that they had to do that because that was all they could do. The conservation centre brings new people alongside them into the environment. It brings scientists and academics, not doing helicopter science, flying in and flying out with the knowledge, but actually working with local communities on the IP, working with local university students on the IP alongside them. And again, that brings livelihoods to those communities to depend on. It brings documentary filmmakers and others, because Guyana is a region of the top of the Amazon basin that's less well known. So that's what I mean about coming alongside communities, able to give them livelihoods based on rights and purpose that helps us all in this global fight to make sure that our forests make that contribution to our desire to meet that 1.5 commitment. As I say, it's a great, great privilege to be here for my first event as Foreign Secretary in the UK, centering, of course, climate within broader foreign policy. And I'm very pleased now that we're able to watch a video about why Indigenous peoples and local communities really matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Foreign Secretary. Thank you for the film from Ford Foundation that really complete what the Foreign Secretary of State MP David said here, and I really capture a little bit of what you said, living in harmony with nature, giving by the examples that you already come from. And of course, like what you said, already your government committed 3 billion for the nature, and I hear 1.5 for forest, and then the new pledge that you wanted to commit. This is exactly what we are looking for, and how that can help the indigenous peoples, the communities that can get back, protect the vital forest that we have. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for the beautiful film that we have. So to follow up in our day, we will have 2 keynotes from the indigenous communities that you can hear from them what really they experience, and we can kick it off to the panels to hear from the rest of the partners. So it's really an honor and privilege to introduce my sister, and of course the first indigenous female minister of the world, I can say, but she is from Brazil, my dear sister Sonia Gogahara, who is with us here to give us the context of the indigenous peoples. Sonia, you have the floor. There is interpretation in Portuguese.
Olá, bom dia. Muito obrigada pela oportunidade de estar participando aqui desse importante diálogo, esse importante evento. Fico feliz aqui já com o anúncio da contribuição do Reino Unido para a proteção das florestas na Amazônia, para os territórios indígenas, né? Bom, hoje eu ocupo um lugar no Poder Executivo no Brasil, o primeiro Ministério dos Povos Indígenas, criado pelo governo do presidente Lula, e muito me honra estar aqui hoje falando nessa posição de ministra de Estado. E é chegada a hora desse reconhecimento do papel dos povos e dos territórios indígenas para todo mundo. Não é possível mais que povos indígenas, somando apenas 5% da população mundial, protege 82% da biodiversidade no mundo e recebe apenas 1% do financiamento que é dedicado para a proteção das florestas. Então nós não temos mais tempo, nós não temos mais muito o que negociar. O recado já está dado, a constatação já está dada de que os governos precisam desse apoio multilateral para continuar aplicando políticas públicas locais. O Brasil tem a posição de continuar protegendo os territórios, de seguir regularizando territórios indígenas, mas esse apoio multilateral dos países desenvolvidos é fundamental para que a gente possa fazer essa implementação das políticas locais. Em menos de 2 anos do governo do presidente Lula, nós demarcamos 10 territórios indígenas, como acaba de falar aqui também o secretário, né? 10 territórios indígenas. Seguimos organizando para demarcar mais territórios e estamos num processo de desintrusão, ou seja, de retirar invasores dos territórios indígenas, sejam eles da extração ilegal de madeira, do garimpo ilegal ou dos grileiros que vivem roubando os territórios indígenas. Estamos agora trabalhando não só para ter ações pontuais, mas que nós tenhamos uma política nacional permanente de desintrusão dos territórios indígenas. Nós estamos também trabalhando para fortalecer a política nacional de gestão ambiental e territorial dos territórios indígenas, que é valorizar as iniciativas indígenas, os produtos da sociobiodiversidade, como uma forma também de contrapor as monoculturas, né, que caracterizam o agronegócio, que segue explorando e aumentando a expansão agrícola, né, nos territórios indígenas. Então, a PNGAT é um dos mecanismos também de garantir a proteção da biodiversidade, como nós acabamos de apresentar na COP29 em Cali, na Colômbia. Seguimos trabalhando para organizar também, né, essa participação indígena nesse processo da construção da COP30 que acontece em Belém do Pará. Mas até lá nós não temos somente que construir as propostas de financiamento. Nós temos já que pensar os legados. Que legados nós vamos deixar com a COP30 no Brasil? Então, entendemos essa COP29 aqui como um importante espaço de decisão para esses financiamentos, para já apoiar esse processo da COP30, mas também já construir os legados que nós queremos deixar. Nós não podemos mais aceitar que continue morrendo povos indígenas, que continue acontecendo as enchentes, os alagamentos, as secas, e as pessoas seguirem já sendo vítimas das mudanças climáticas e o mundo inteiro não enxergar isso já como uma demanda urgente. Nós não estamos mais falando de mudanças climáticas como um problema do futuro. Nós temos já exemplos concretos do que está acontecendo em todas as regiões. E nós precisamos aqui já fazer com que os governos assumam as suas posições, assim como criar as estruturas e condições para o alcance das metas. E o Brasil, com o governo do presidente Lula, o Ministério dos Povos Indígenas, segue comprometido, tanto de articular esses financiamentos direto para povos e organizações indígenas, como também para a implementação da política pública, né, do Estado brasileiro. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much, Sister Sonia. As usual, you already put it there. You give the concrete example of what we need for this money. We are not asking just for the play. It can help for the land demarcation, but we need the policies, as you said, and we need to land it in a concrete legacy at the COP30. Thank you so much for this. Allow me now to give another keynote from Balkisou Bouba. Balkisou Bouba is from all the three Forest Alliance, but she is also from Repaliak and sister of mine from the same community. So I have to mention that. And please give your keynote.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Thank you very much, everyone. I am Balkisou Bouba, like the moderator said. I'm from the Mbororo Pastoralist Community of Cameroon. I am representing the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, and this alliance happens to regroup indigenous people and local communities across the Amazon Basin, the Mesoamerica, the Congo Basin, and Indonesia. I would like to thank the UK Foreign Secretary and all others here present for recognizing and respecting the rights of indigenous people, as well as some of the commitments that they just made. Thank you, Mr. Foreign Secretary. Looking at this event, this is a crucial moment for us to evaluate the current pledge, as well as design a new one that is more ambitious, inclusive, and committed to direct funding for indigenous people and local communities. Let's look at the progress that has been made since the Glasgow pledge. The Glasgow Pledge was a historic one, moving us beyond theoretical recognition to acknowledge our essential role in addressing global crises. Our territories hold real solutions, and this was affirmed in 2021. We are pleased to see accelerated implementation. About 79% of the first 1.7 billion has been allocated, and direct funding to our organizations rose from 2.1% in 2022 to 10.6% in 2023. These are promising steps, but much work remains to be done. Our call to action and our call to partnership for a new pledge is a new pledge must include us as partners and not beneficiaries. Our traditional governance and cultural practices are the backbone of territorial stewardship and should shape the pledge decision and structures. We call for annual planning and evaluation meetings with indigenous people and local communities, and a core decision-making role for us. While we celebrate the recent rise in direct funding, we need even greater increase. Our mechanisms, such as those under the Shandia platform, demonstrate powerful on-the-ground impact, despite limited resources. My organization, the Network of Indigenous People and Local Communities, for Management of Forest Ecosystems in Central Africa, known as REPALIAC, has created a financial mechanism for the Congo Basin that was launched under the Shandia platform in September during the Climate Week. A new pledge must dismantle the current financial and bureaucratic obstacles that prevent funds from reaching those protecting the forests. This call is directed at governments and multilateral donors. We need to break down bureaucratic barriers for real solutions. This COP is called the COP of Finances, yet we see the same power structures that created the crisis. Our challenge is to go further, to decolonize these systems. A new pledge built alongside indigenous people can be a step towards this transformation. I equally take this opportunity to announce that the network of indigenous people known as REPALIAC in the Congo Basin will be holding the Three Basin Summit in March 2025. Respecting the rights of indigenous people is key, and indigenous people are part of the solutions. So let's work with them as partners and not beneficiaries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Balki, and I think you really ended in a good note that let's work as partners, not beneficiaries. And that's led me to kick to the second part of this event, the panel. You see, usually we have indigenous peoples part of the panelists, and then the financial partners like speak first, but we changed it already. And this is like the concrete example we have here. The indigenous peoples give the keynote, and now we are moving to the government from the global north to the global south, and also to the funder, I can tell it, to my friend Andrew here, who is leading the big fund that can have a panels. So let me go to you now. I would like to start by you, the Deputy Minister of Colombia, Mr. Tiana, with us. And congratulations for the COP16 in Cali. You really give us the opportunity to have the indigenous people subsidiary body, but also the local communities, the African descendants. So we really get like a big step on that. And from your government perspective and from your perspective, how you think that can be really kicked off, we can have this support to the indigenous peoples and local communities and land it in a nice way, as the Foreign Secretary said and my sister Senia said at the COP30.
Gracias. Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Un gusto estar en este espacio, saludar a todas ustedes, a todas las personas que están aquí presentes. Por supuesto, aquí es un honor para mí compartir este espacio con personas tan distinguidas y agradecer por ese reconocimiento a lo que ha sido la COP16 en Cali. En realidad un esfuerzo muy importante de nuestro país, un esfuerzo porque esta fuera la COP de la gente, la COP en que las voces de las comunidades, las voces de quienes luchan día a día en defensa de sus territorios fueran escuchadas. Nosotros creo que tenemos grandes retos, efectivamente, luego de haber hecho la COP y de pensar que la COP, nosotros siempre pensamos la COP como un proceso que no se cerraba en Cali, sino que continuaba aquí en Azerbaiyán y sobre todo hacia Brasil, donde tenemos grandes expectativas de lo que pueda seguir avanzando esta negociación climática. Yo quiero decir en torno a los compromisos que como gobierno tenemos con los pueblos indígenas, es que Colombia es un país que desde el 1991, con la Constitución, reconoció la tenencia colectiva de tierras y alrededor del 38% de las tierras continentales son de los pueblos indígenas, son de las comunidades afrodescendientes. Es decir, más o menos el 24%, 25% del territorio colombiano es colectivo, es de pueblos colectivos. Y en esa perspectiva, desde nuestro país nos hemos comprometido con varios asuntos que pueden ser incluso muy interesantes para otros países, como es el reconocimiento a los pueblos indígenas de ser autoridad ambiental indígena. Recientemente, en octubre, el presidente de la República de Colombia decretó que los pueblos indígenas sean autoridad ambiental indígena. Y ese es un reconocimiento por su labor como guardianes del territorio. Creemos que ese reconocimiento se tiene que expresar en un asunto tan fundamental como el que esos territorios sean conservados justamente por la gestión que han hecho los pueblos indígenas. En esa perspectiva estamos entonces trabajando por fortalecer esta figura en una articulación con las otras autoridades ambientales indígenas. Ahora bien, aquí se han mencionado asuntos que han sido vitales como la cooperación que hemos logrado, el financiamiento. Aquí hay dos actores fundamentales en la cooperación con Colombia, que es Reino Unido y Noruega, que han sido fundamentales para el trabajo justamente que hacemos en los territorios amazónicos, por ejemplo, como el programa Visión Amazonía y otros programas que se desarrollan en el país. Y esto para decir que el tema del financiamiento es fundamental, el tema del financiamiento climático. El financiamiento en garantía de las transformaciones que requieren nuestros territorios para una verdadera acción climática como la que estamos tejiendo en Colombia en ese trabajo articulado con los pueblos indígenas. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. No, thank you very much for that. And thank you for the leadership of your government. So really we are seeing the change and that's what we need. But of course we cannot do this change without a collaboration. And that's where my dear friend here, Andrew Stur, will come in. So Andrew is really the champion of the forest protections that I know before joining the Bezos Earth Fund. And then when he joined this, it's really like a great change we are seeing that he's making on investing on indigenous peoples, local communities, and doing around the forest. So Andrew, I wanted to know what recent development that you can share with us that give you more optimism, and what will be the role of the philanthropy in these very important and urgent protections of the forest that we are all looking for?
Well, first, thank you. I mean, what a treat to be here. There is a lot of good news, but first it's important to say we're just beginning. We need a lot more good news in this space. So, but what's the good news? This meeting is part of the good news. Foreign Secretary Lamy, thank you. To make this your keynote first engagement at COP29, for making your first key speech and cue, a wonderful leadership. Your announcements today were great, and the UK's announcement of its new NDC is also going to be great today. Thank you very much indeed for that. But even better than that leadership, I am sitting next to an indigenous leader of an indigenous ministry responsible for changing the way things are done. And that is part of a change that's going on, which is profoundly exciting. And what you did at COP16 just 2 weeks ago, setting up some structures, are part of that evolution we've got. So number one, there is leadership that we haven't seen before. And thank you to Norway as well, by the way. We must never forget Norway. The second piece of good news is there's an intellectual journey which is now so clear that no one can resist it. And it basically says if indigenous people and local communities get tenure to their land and they are given the ability to protect that tenure, deforestation will shrink massively because they choose to treat trees that are alive as more serious than trees that are dead. And the evidence now is overwhelming. And that's because indigenous people have a deeply spiritual sense, also a much, much longer term sense that we all need to learn from. So there's an intellectual journey that is becoming irresistible and I hope unstoppable. There's a third piece of good news, but again, it's just beginning, which is resources. COP26 was remarkable. The 1.7 billion was a terrific piece of leadership from the UK and other countries. And as a philanthropist, we were very honored to be part of that. And it's good news that, that it will be dispersed by the time of COP30. And it's good news that we're now thinking about what happens after COP30. And we need to be even more ambitious, as Foreign Secretary, you were saying. So that's all good news too. I should say that of the 1.7 billion, a lot of efforts are being made to get that directly in the hands of Indigenous people, but we're not yet successful enough at that. We have got to keep working on that. In terms of what role we all need to play now, and I speak as the privileged president and CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund, we're just one philanthropy, but we play a role in coordinating a number of other philanthropies, something called Protecting Our Planet Challenge, which has put $5 billion on the table for 30 by 30, of which 20% would go directly to Indigenous people and local communities. And so what do we need to do? Number one, we need to do exactly what you were saying, Foreign Secretary, which is focus on tenure. And that requires serious legal help. It requires mapping, remote sensing, a whole range of issues there, and political engagement. Second, we need to think about alternative livelihoods. Indigenous people have managed the forest so well for so long, but at the same time, they need to have incomes. And so the entire movement we're now seeing, led by Brazil, on the subject of bioeconomy is very important. We've just made some major grants to indigenous groups in Brazil precisely to think through alternative, non-destructive livelihoods. A third thing that needs to be done is to focus on protection. Indigenous people and local communities need to get in real time alerts telling them when there is any encroachment into their forest territories, should they not want that. If they want it, that's fine, but if they don't want it, they should be told and they should be given the ability. And so one of the things that we finance, and so do the Norwegians, are technologies such as Global Forest Watch and Land and Carbon Lab that actually in real time can not only see virtually every tree that's falling, but can also then transmit it in real time to cell phones of people anywhere in the world. And that is extremely important. And finally, we need to be really alert to inequities that exist. In virtually every country in the world, indigenous people and local communities suffer inequities because of power structures. I'll give you just one example that we're trying to address. If you look at carbon markets in much of the Amazon, you will see that the people who earn the carbon markets, those that are protecting the forests, i.e. indigenous people and local communities, they are totally bypassed by carbon markets. They don't get any of the resources whatsoever. The resources go to local governments, central governments, to developers and other people, and we need to change that. So one small thing we're financing, together with our friends at EDF and others, we're financing legal support, capacity building, so that we can insist that indigenous peoples groups have a seat at the table so they can get what is rightfully theirs. So I simply want to say what a joy it is to be here in this sort of a sense of a movement, a momentum which is accelerating, which needs to keep accelerating because the job is absolutely not yet done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew. And this is so lovely to see the continuous engagement of philanthropy, and also you all name it. We need the seat in the tables, but we need also to take the decision. We need to go beyond just the protection, the life and livelihood, bioeconomy, that you really say it loud and clear, and that's what we need. As an indigenous woman, I'm really expecting that. So now let me turn to my last but not least panelist, my dear friend here, Hans. And Hans, you remember the leadership of Norway that we did have the discussion during Paris Agreement. So since that time, I know that Norway is really committed in protections of forests and indigenous peoples, and we had really a long night and day just discussing around that. You're going back to your parliament, to their ministry, and coming back to the indigenous peoples. So since then, you play an incredible role, and now you are chairing the Tenure facility, the group of all the funders that Norway is chairing it. May you share with us what have been the result that you see from the funder group so far, and what do you think about the new pledge that we are talking about it?
Well, thank you so much, Hindu, and thank you, Foreign Secretary, for hosting us here today. I certainly agree with Andrew that this is very encouraging to us to see that this is a very high priority for you and the new government in the UK. And thank you to the panelists, to the ministers, and all the representatives of indigenous peoples who are here for your contributions. Then I'll give a little report on what has been happening. Much needs to be done, we all know that, but I think it's also important from time to time to focus on some of the good things that are happening right now. And I would like to begin and say that in Glasgow just 3 years ago, more than 140 countries signed the Glasgow Leaders Declaration to halt and reverse forest loss by 2030, an extremely ambitious goal, but one that we believe is reachable. And we know that working with indigenous peoples and local communities is key for reaching this goal. And the Foreign Secretary mentioned that I think 25 public and private funders came together and pledged $1.7 billion to support indigenous peoples and local communities' forest tenure rights from 2021 to 25. The results from the Funders 23 report shows that we have already allocated $1.3 billion from this pledge. This is almost 80% of the pledge and means we will exceed the pledge amount, we hope, by the end of 2025. Just in 2023, we dispersed more than $520 million US. 100 indigenous and local community organizations received direct support. But we also know, and as we have heard here today, funding is not enough. Political will and long-term advocacy have been crucial. And I would also like then to mention some of these steps forward that have been made by tropical forest countries and indigenous peoples organizations in partnership with us. I'd like to congratulate Brazil. As the minister said, Brazil has acknowledged 10 new indigenous territories since President Lula took office in 2023. Peru has titled 1.9 million hectares for indigenous peoples, including for people living in voluntary isolation. The Democratic Republic of Congo has passed a bill on the rights of indigenous peoples. Colombia, and congratulations to the Vice Minister here as well, is implementing a decree for indigenous territorial entities covering up to 16 million hectares in the eastern Amazon region. And Indonesia is advancing in its forestry program, granting customary communities the right to manage traditional forest territories. These results and many more deserve our continued support. And that's why it's so important to work on a second pledge to support indigenous peoples and local communities' forest tenure rights and guardianship. Right now, we are in the process of identifying what different funders can commit for the next 5-year period. My own country, Norway, is committed to work with indigenous organizations, other countries and other funders in designing a new pledge so that it can have the impact we hope for. Tropical forest countries, including Peru, Colombia and Brazil, came together in Cali with a call for action to step up recognition of land and forest tenure rights for indigenous peoples and local communities. These efforts need our support. Globally, millions of hectares of land are in the process of being formally recognized. The opportunity is large, but it requires systemic changes to land and forest tenure laws, policies, and implementation capacity. We need to support enforcement of these laws so that indigenous peoples can be safe from violence and intrusion in their territories. Norway has seen good results from long-term support to tropical countries, systems for mapping, as Andrew also talked about, and scaling up forest tenure rights recognition. And we'll be very happy to work with the Bezos Earth Fund on many of these important issues. And partnerships with indigenous and local organizations are key for reaching this result. And I think I'll stop there. So thank you so much. Thank you, Hindu.
Thank you so much, Hans. Thank you for the reporting back that the money went to 80% already. And of course, I'm waiting for the 20% also. 2025 is around the corner. So we hope that it will also reach soon, and then we can work in the second pledge. So yeah, and thank you again for the commitment of your government. So when we have UK committed, you are committed, of course the other can follow. When we have a Bezos Earth Fund committed, of course we can have others. So that's really what we want. Let me go a quick round to all of you. I really wanted to know, and I will start from you, Hans, and coming this side. Just so in one word, what is the challenge that you think can block us? And the other word, what will make you optimistic we can get there?
What would block us?
So what is the challenge that can limit us to get what we want? And what is the optimism that you have? You say, yes, we can do it. In one word.
2 words, 3 words even. The lack of political will. That will stop us, and I think political will, 2 words, will make this successful. Working with indigenous peoples and local communities, but we need that kind of political leadership that the Foreign Secretary has almost.
Wonderful. Political will can make us to do that, and lack of the political will can really stop us. And work with indigenous peoples. I love it. Go ahead, Andrew.
The barrier, old-fashioned technocratic mindsets. The hope, an irresistible, unstoppable momentum.
Old-fashioned, yes. And then we are unstoppable, that's for sure. This is momentum will take us. Sonia.
Bom, acho que falta ainda esse reconhecimento e valorização dos povos indígenas e do papel dos seus territórios. E que me anima é esse protagonismo que a gente vem assumindo e o aumento da participação indígena nesses processos.
Great. Honoring indigenous peoples and all the commitment of the agency, of course, totally agree. Balkisu.
Thank you very much. For me, I will talk about non-involvement of indigenous people. If it doesn't involve indigenous people, it's against indigenous people. So what can help us to move forward is collaboration. We need to collaborate to frame everything around indigenous people, local communities should be done with them, for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Indigenous peoples, with them, by them, and without including them, we will fail. Deputy Minister.
Bueno, yo diría que el negacionismo a la crisis climática que vivimos, a la crisis sistémica, negar que estamos en un momento muy crítico en el que la humanidad y el mundo, tal como lo conocemos, está en riesgo, para mí es el gran problema. Y lo que me da optimismo es la gente que lucha día a día por hacer este mundo posible, por hacer estos cambios, estas transformaciones posibles.
Thank you so much. Yes, denying is an obstacle for sure, but people are the hope, absolutely. Final word to you.
Well, look, I'm very hopeful. I think this panel is a panel that you might not have seen 5-10 years ago, and is testimony to where the world is going, because it's truly the multi-ethnic vision that we require if we're serious about the climate emergency. And I think that I also say this as a politician. We know that there are different traditions in the world that sometimes ping-pong back and forth on the climate issue. But what I do find is that nature particularly is an area that unites. There is less political friction in the area of nature. So we have to keep hope alive. We have to put nature quite center. And of course, we've got to defend the rights of the custodians of the land, which is what brings us here together, and that is Indigenous people.
Absolutely. So Nation Center put Indigenous peoples and politics have to move. You see, I make them do all the summary of the panel, so then I don't have to do that again. So that was my objective. So thank you so much to all of you for this panel. But I have to say, as Indigenous women, if we wanted to protect a tropical forest, we must protect the door of the tropical forest, the savannas, and if we wanted to protect the savannas, we protect the desert, so all ecosystems are interconnected. And this is the call of Indigenous peoples for the second pledge, all ecosystem-based and all region-based to accelerate all the solutions. And with this panel, we can do it together. Thank you to the UK Pavilion, thank you to the UK Ministries, and thank you to all of you being in this fantastic panel, and hope to see you very soon with a big celebration at the COP30 for Indigenous peoples. Have a good day.